It started as self-love, but I realized it goes way deeper than that. It's more about being whole and accepting who I am as I am. I was told I was too much, too this, too that, too emotional my whole life. And I believed that. And I tried to conform to what other people thought I was. And I realized that no, I don't have to conform. It's okay. I'm not for everybody. I don't have to apologize for that.
Welcome to The Change Effect, the podcast that helps you turn life transitions into powerful new beginnings. One story, one shift, one breakthrough at a time. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, leadership coach, and change strategist who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders break through barriers to create success on their own terms. I now work with women to step into change to create a life they love. Whether you're putting yourself at the center of your own story, redefining success, or making a power pivot in your life, career, or business, you're in the right place. Each week, we dive into conversations with trailblazers, changemakers, and everyday women experiencing the ripple effects that come from overcoming the fear and doing it anyway, providing actionable steps, practical strategies, and a whole lot of fun along the way. So if you're ready to step up and become unstoppable, buckle up and let's get started. Our past has a way of leaving fingerprints on our future, quietly shaping our choices, our patterns, and the way we see ourselves. For many people, especially survivors of trauma and emotional manipulation, the journey to reclaiming your identity isn't just about moving on. It's about breaking cycles that once defined you. Darla Ridilla knows this path only too well. After surviving years of narcissistic abuse and toxic relationship patterns, she made the courageous decision not just to leave, but to rebuild her life from the inside out. She now works with women who've been told they're too much, too emotional, too intense, too driven, and are done contorting themselves to stay connected, helping them break trauma-rooted patterns and reclaim their power in every relationship without shrinking, silencing, or settling. Darla is a certified somatic trauma-informed relationship coach, a dynamic speaker, founder of High Value Woman, and host of the podcast You Have the Power, The Road to Truth, Freedom, and Real Connection, where she challenges the old rules of love, loyalty, and self-sacrifice, and shows women how to stop abandoning themselves to keep the peace. If you've ever questioned your worth, struggling in a toxic relationship, or wondered how to rebuild from rock bottom, Darla's story will remind you healing is possible and self-trust is your way home. Welcome, Darla. It's wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you, Noelle. I'm so happy to be here.
So Darla, I know that I usually have the guests start where they want to, but I would love to just get a little bit of background from you and where you grew up and kind of just to get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of DC. It's a crazy place on one hand, but it's also a great place to grow up because of all the diversity, and I had an excellent education. But, growing up, I didn't have a really good example of what healthy relationships look like. My parents they did the best they could with what they had. And, well, I learned some things about myself and how to interact that I had to unlearn as an adult, right?
Yep. What were some of the things that sort of came up in your childhood that brought you then to the relationships that you went into? Because then maybe that's the best way to start.
Yeah. So my dad was pretty much an unpredictable person. I suspect bipolar, but I don't know. I had this habit of walking on eggshells all the time because when he got home at 3:00, I can remember so distinctly many days when it became 3:00, the stress would hit because would nice dad show up or would mad dad show up? And so that transferred into my adult relationships because while it was very dysfunctional, my comfort zone was walking on eggshells, hypervigilance, having to earn love versus just giving it, just love it, being loved for who I was. And so that's how I attracted those emotionally unavailable and abusive men, because that's what felt familiar to me.
When you think about your first relationship that felt like that was coming through, can you describe kind of how that started or how you kind of felt, maybe the turning point that you found that you were in something like that where you thought, okay, and maybe I say that with the caveat that I know that we don't immediately always know this, right? It's an evolution, but maybe just give us a little bit of an idea of the first relationship that you saw some of that happening.
When I look back, I didn't know it at the time, but when I look back, it was all the way back to teenage years, my first boyfriends, whether they cheated on me or they weren't available because they were, they were just being themselves. Even my first husband, while he wasn't abusive, he was emotionally unavailable. And that just went through all my relationships. The turning point for me it started in my second marriage. And I did not know that I was in an abusive marriage until a year after I left it. It was a counselor that pointed that out. I had no idea what narcissism was. I was madly in love with this man. He was very handsome and in the beginning, very charming. I didn't know what love bombing was. I didn't know that he was too good to be true. And to be quite honest, my turning point was the day that I almost took my life.
Oh, Darla.
I came so, so close. But what stopped me was he was on a smear campaign and he was telling people I was crazy. And I realized in that moment, if I do this, he's going to say, see, I told you so. I told you she was crazy. Look what she did. I'm kind of a fighter and a scrapper. And so I thought, no, he can't win. I'm not going to let him do this. But I didn't know how. I knew I could not continue on in the mental state I was in, but I didn't know how to fix it. I just cried out into my higher power and said, if you want me to stay on this earth, you better show me the way and you better do it quick. And that's when that counselor came into my life.
That's amazing. Going from being in a relationship to then feeling that you're at that like end of your rope. What were some of the, maybe even just to talk about narcissism to begin with, right? So narcissistic behavior, I have had it explained to me, but I still don't know that I completely and totally understand it. Now, how is it described to you kind of by your therapist in terms of what the signs of it are? Because I'm assuming you didn't come in to talk to your therapist and say, I think I'm in a relationship with a narcissist. Sometimes that's pretty insightful if you knew that. But did you know that right off the bat?
No. In fact, first of all, that word is thrown around a lot. It doesn't mean someone who's a jerk. We can be someone who's self-centered and a jerk, and they're not necessarily a narcissist. And it wasn't a therapist, actually. In fact, I had some troubles with therapists actually understanding it because it's kind of unless you've had lived experience, it's hard to understand. But what came to me is as I was working through this spiritual counselor, I don't know, I started looking into behavior somehow. I don't even remember how I came across the book, The Gaslight Effect. And Robin, I can't remember her last, Stern, I think her last name is. But anyway, I started reading the book and I'm like, what is happening here? This lady is describing my everyday life and she doesn't know me. And so I started to dive into it and I started Googling it and all of a sudden narcissism came up. And I started following a guy on YouTube and he was explaining his experiences with his narcissistic girlfriend. And I'm like, holy cow, this is what happened to me. And that's really how I came to that realization. It was just comparing my experiences with other people's.
What would be a couple of different like signs of it that you recognized or that you saw, oh gosh, that sounds like what I'm experiencing?
When I look back, I initially thought that he asked for divorce out of nowhere, that everything was fine, everything was great. But then when I look back, there were red flags from day one. One of those signs is they tend to have a harem of, I'm referring to the male narcissists. There are females, but, the males, they tend to have a harem of women around them. They're very well revered in a community, and not everyone who's well known in a community is this, but they often are seen as charismatic and the pillar of the community. He had a lot of women around him, and I had a bad feeling about how chummy he was with his ex-wife. And I should have listened to that because he was cheating on me with her, as well as other women. Some of the other things, and this is a very common tactic, it's a three-part cycle. So they love bomb. And what that looks like is the white knight on the white horse. They're everything you've ever dreamed of. They fast track the relationship, lots of gifts, lots of attention. Like I just immediately just fell in love, madly in love with this man. He was just amazing. He was everything I ever wanted. But then as he gets his hooks into me, I call it like giving a child a lollipop and then you grab it away. Like he started to ignore me a little bit, make snide comments about my appearance or my behaviors. Oh, I really care about how you look, but when your hair isn't long, I'm really not attracted to you. Oh, you should wear black because pastels and bright colors don't look good on you. Those kind of subtle pokes, digs. And then it goes to the discard. That doesn't necessarily mean they leave the relationship, but in some cases, would disappear for hours at a time. Some of them do for days. He would more so do it in the home. Silent treatment was his chosen tactic to really kind of torture me. And he knew, see, I divulged a lot of information early on. And so he knew what my hot buttons were, my triggers. And my mother used that silent treatment. And so he would ignore me in the home quite frequently. And of course, the day he asked for the divorce was like the final love bomb, but I mean, the final discard. But what happens is this 3-part cycle. It keeps going, but it actually shortens in time as the longer you go into it. I mean, he literally went from love bomb to discard when he asked for the divorce.
Wow. So it's kind of cyclical.
It's cyclical.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the love bombing keeps happening in certain cycles.
Yep. It's kind of like that. He was more of a mental abuser, but the physical abuser, the guy that beats his wife and then brings her flowers and says, "I'm sorry, I'll never do that again." But he forgot to tell you till the next time.
Yeah. How many years were you with him for? This is your second husband.
10.
Okay. And then you get to this low point, and thank goodness your better thinking said, no, this is not what I'm going to do. Right.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you then? Now, this is your second, you had 2 husbands, correct?
3, actually. Yeah.
So no, because I want to make sure that we get to the next part. So the next phase, so you go into this next relationship. How did that transpire?
Yeah. I thought I was more healed than I was. I had taken about a year. I actually ended up leaving. I was living in the Denver area at the time, and I moved to New Mexico because my second ex-husband was stalking me, and I felt very physically unsafe. And so I moved to New Mexico, and that's where I met my last husband, my third husband. And I thought I was more healed than I was. I didn't understand that narcissistic abuse is not a one and done. With any trauma is this way. There's layers to it. I met my last husband, and he's not a narcissist. He's not a bad person, but he had his own baggage. He had addiction issues, and he wasn't willing to deal with the reasons why. Even though he stopped drinking, he stopped using drugs, the underlying causes were still there. And I actually still love him a great deal, and I wish him very well. We're on good terms now. But I realized, first of all, I didn't give myself enough time to get to know him. I married him very quickly. And I think if I had been with him longer, time would have told the tale. That was my mistake in that one. I didn't give it enough time. He did treat me well in many, many ways. He really did. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't enough to balance out his own stuff. And there were some things with his father, too, that were inexcusable that he didn't take care of. He didn't really protect me enough as well.
Well, it's interesting how you describe him, too, because do you feel like through the course of the different relationships that you had an evolution, right? We never like, oh, I have it all figured out. I don't think we ever are going to all have it figured out, right? But every time that you stepped into something different, you had a bit more of that, the lens opened a little bit further, right? Of like, even just how you were describing him, that he had issues with, I mean, that's language that you use when you start to recognize that it's not you, right? Mm-hmm. Like where we say like, oh, well, I don't know why I was but when you really think back on the relationships that you were in, the fact that you had trust in them, it makes sense with your upbringing that you had to go through some of those things to get to where you are now, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a very roundabout way.
One of the biggest mistakes I made through my second marriage was from the time I was 16 to 45. I was never single. I literally was getting out of a relationship, going right into one, or unfortunately between my first and second husband, and this should have been the red flag, he was basically trying to get me while I was still with my husband. I mean, and he called my first husband, a friend. But after that second marriage, that's when I started to take the downtime in between each and every relationship. Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I continue to, but I would evaluate, even just down to the last relationship I ended about a year ago. I took time to say, I'm not responsible for that person's behavior, but why was I attracted to him in the first place? What inside me attracted me to, and then not just the good things, but the bad things too. What in me needs to heal?
And so when you started to do that introspection, what was the first step that you took?
I think, the first step is, back in 2013, was really figuring, I finally got it, that there was a pattern. I didn't see the pattern till then.
Yeah.
Why do I keep attracting these relationships? I've had 2 failed marriages already. This isn't how I saw my life. What's going on here? It was like fresh ground. I mean, I knew that I had a very unhappy childhood, but I didn't understand. I think it was really when I started to go to the spiritual center in Denver, and I also started to listen to like positive thinking, Joe Vitale and all of that. I'd never heard of that before. I was an angry person too. I was very angry and at times controlling. And so those were things I had to let go of.
Yeah.
I mean, anger is valid, but it's what you do with it. And it wasn't productive.
Well, and it's the moments too that you start to have those realizations that once you let go, that like you're letting yourself off the hook too. Like the anger only kind of keeps you hooked to a certain degree. And then once you're able to release some of that, it's like, oh, I'm actually giving myself a break. Yes. And I don't think we make those connections early in life. I mean, it always is, it's such a wonder to me when I think of the different phases that we all go through in like relationship at times in our lives. And you look back at like in your 30s, your 40s, how you were processing life. And the people that you attract into your life are at that same level. So then when you look back and you go, gosh, I can't believe that I did that. I always look at and I think, well, but that's where it was. That's where I was on that path, right? The people are going to show up that are in the same place that you are. But so now that you are out of that, and I know you're working with women, I want to hear about this because I think you're doing such important work. Are you working with clients now that are within like narcissistic relationships? Are they coming to you from all different backgrounds, all different situations? Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I do still specialize in narcissistic abuse, but where I really focus more on, because this has my own journey evolved, I realized over the past year or two that it was more than just healing from narcissistic abuse. It was becoming whole within myself. That was the key. Because I was always seeking the outside validation. And that's why I was the perfect storm for a narcissist. They're like, oh, she's perfect for me because she needs me.
You're right. That's it for now. Until next time.
That doesn't give me the right to do anything I want. I want to preface that. But my traits, my innate traits, who I am, how I see the world, how, yes, I'm loud and brash and, and have lots of energy and I'm intense. And there's nothing wrong with those things.
That's such a pivotal moment. I'm curious when do you remember when that sort of hit you or when you started to internalize that?
It's just within the past year or two. I read the book Single on Purpose by John Kim, and he talks about we can't love ourselves if we don't know who we are. We really have to get into who are you, not who society says, not what you do for a living. And so it went from there. And then after the breakup last year, that was a huge pivot too, because after 2 months of isolating myself on purpose, I did that just because I needed to go inward. I haven't dated anyone since because I realized that it's not only okay for me to be me, but it's okay to have standards too. That realization hit in the past year. My standards are okay and they're not too high. In fact, they're getting higher all the time.
That's great. That's great because that's what you're going to attract in, right? Mm-hmm. The more that you put that out there, the more you're going to attract that in. Have you found that you have, like, what are some of the other things you feel you've overcome just in that on that path?
I think one of the biggest things is learning not to chase people, learning that it's okay to sit back and watch, learning to let them come to me, because that chase is fear. That is lack of self-esteem, fear of abandonment. So really overcoming that and understanding that if someone leaves, like you said, that it's not about me, or if it doesn't work out and I leave, it's not about me. It's about, this was a lesson and it doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong per se. While I can work on myself, I'm not broken, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, which is such a huge realization for all of us at different times in our lives, to realize that, no, this is it. You get to do with this life what you're going to do with this life. So being able to move forward from that is huge.
Yeah.
When you're working with women, what are some of the common themes that you're dealing with when they come to you for help?
A lot of times it's the woman that says, you know what, I'm really done with how things are happening, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, a family dynamic. I'm really done and I want it to be different, but I don't know how to make it different.
Yes.
So that's where the work is. When she's ready, she's ready. And
Yes.
just having the desire to change, that's the step. You have to have that first, or everything else is off the table. You know?
Right. Yes. The desire is where it starts. That is for sure.
Right.
Are there different steps that, I mean, if I came to you and I had kind of I'm in the very early stages of this and I don't even really necessarily know, maybe I'm with a narcissistic person and I don't even realize it. What are kind of the baby steps that you would take someone through, or what would you recommend for them to do just to get a sense of maybe what's happening? You know how it's sometimes it's just to give them a little bit of a different focal point.
Yeah, absolutely. After we figure out what those patterns are and what it is that is holding them back, I really recommend it. Baby steps are okay. In fact, narcissism is a form of brainwashing. It's not a matter of mind over matter. It's not of, just pick up and leave. First of all, if they're in a relationship, we have to determine whether or not there's a potential for violence, because that is often the case. And so we want to make sure she has an exit that's safe. If she has to have an exit plan and she has to kind of stay for a little while to get that plan in motion, how can we do that and keep her as safe as possible? Once they're out, it's really kind of deconstructing all of those narratives and all that crap that person has dumped on her. You know, whether that's a narcissistic mother, I see this a lot, and I don't know what it is about the mothers. I know this is weird. So statistically, more men are narcissists, but I hear more in a parental role about the narcissistic mother. I don't know why, but let's chip away at that, because that's how they got you. I say it's the drip effect. One drip on the rock at a time that erodes it over a long time. We have to put that rock back together. It's going to look like that Chinese vase with like the gold, but it's one piece at a time. What is it that they've done that really isn't true? And actually, it's going to connect to childhood. What narrative did they actually validate for you that you had inside of yourself? And we just break it down one at a time, one day at a time, because every time it's going to be different.
Yes. Well, and I can imagine even just how you describe it, it's like it is such a ball of yarn when you think about any relationships can be difficult, right? Relationships can be difficult. And then if you have that layered on top of it, where there is someone with, and I don't know even if it's a motivation, because I'm not sure I know enough about narcissistic personality to know if that's a agenda, or is that just their own mental health issue, or whatever you would call it, disposition, whatever it is. Like if that's something that's ingrained in them that they don't even realize that they're doing. I'm not sure how conscious it is. It's both. Okay. So there's a certain makeup there, but then there's also, there's an intention around it or something. How would you describe that?
It's a very deep childhood wound, very early in childhood. And so it is so deep that scientifically, the prefrontal cortex, where we have our reasoning, where we have our accountability, our morals, our understanding of right and wrong, does not develop in the brain. So from what I understand, they cannot actually, it's like if you don't have a leg, you don't grow another leg, right?
Right.
There's different levels, spectrums. So some of them are much lower in the spectrum and they do actually become aware of it. But I still think it's ingrained. But they, I've dealt with different levels. I've had 3 in my life, and my ex-husband definitely was on the malignant scale. He did not have any sense of what I'm doing is wrong. He had such a sense of entitlement that it can't possibly be my fault because I'm always right. And yes, it was an agenda. I believe that his level of narcissism, they manipulate you on purpose. In fact, they target very successful, outgoing women for a reason, because there's something in you that they lack, and they think they're vampires, basically. They'll suck it out of you, and they take great pleasure at breaking you down.
What is the upside to them doing that? Is it a power thing?
It's a power dynamic. So they're often very charismatic and appear to be very confident. But the truth is, inside, they hate themselves. This is something they're not going to say, but they hate themselves. And in order for them to feel better about themselves, like a typical bully, they have to make others feel lower.
Oh, wow. And the women that you work with, most of them are sort of ensnared in this type of a relationship or are out of it and trying to make some sense out of it.
Yeah.
What is the biggest aha moment for women that come out of that? Like once they kind of see through the fog, is there anything that you've experienced to be common, or some of the moments that they've gone, oh my gosh, I can't believe X, Y, or Z?
I think it's more the acceptance of it. Leaving or breaking up with a narcissist is so much harder than just any normal breakup, because when you break up with someone because it didn't work out, even if there was a lot of fighting, you're losing a person. But with a narcissist, because everything is a lie, they are basically playing a role, an actor in this scene, but you bought into it as reality. So not only are you grieving the loss of the person in the relationship, you're grieving the loss of the fantasy that you thought was real. It really messes with your head. So I think really helping women to understand why it hurts so bad, breaking their emotional tie to that, because I know I tried to go no contact. I failed miserably at it. I mean, I was so addicted to him. I couldn't seem to break away. So I see that a lot with other women too, where they don't even realize they're addicted. They can't understand why they can't stay away. It's like this compulsion they can't control.
Well, what's interesting too, and I'm thinking that I've seen this somewhere, I don't know where this came up, but where it also has become like a sense, once the person is away and once they have a distance from it, it's almost like a feeling of shame because you've gone along for this ride, or that you've been taken on something that didn't feel authentic when you look back on it in retrospect. Is that even capturing it? I don't know if that's right, but
no, it's 100%. I dealt with a lot of shame because he was so good at messing with my head that I did things that I'm very ashamed of, that it's very out of character. I cheated on my first husband. I'm not a cheater. Didn't before, haven't since. But he made it look like it's okay because he's neglecting you, which he was, but that was a whole other story. I didn't have the right to do that. I should have just left the marriage, but because of my own insecurities, I didn't. But yes, there's a lot of shame that's involved, and women often feel, there's the manipulation. So they're often really strong, confident women in the beginning. How could I have been hoodwinked? How could he, like Ted Bundy, getting girls in the car with no front seat. That's how good they are. But when you get out, you're like, but still, why didn't I see it? We really start to doubt our own judgment, to be honest.
I think that's the insidiousness of it, right? Because it's not, it's almost like when you think of an abusive relationship that's outwardly abusive, and then this seems like it's sort of behind the scenes abusive, where you can't see it on the surface. And then it's until you're into it, and then it's happening and you're in the midst of it or something. Kind of sucks you in.
Yeah, because when I got out, because it was primarily emotional abuse. And then, of course, he's very revered by all the people around us, like of this amazing, such a nice guy, and he's so wonderful. And then when I started to tell them that he was a Jekyll and Hyde, this is what he was like when the door shut in my house and you weren't around, they didn't believe me. They're like, no, he's a nice guy. And I'm like, oh, no, he's not.
And I can tell you, just having one of the things that always gets me, and it's probably from life experience, but when you're told that something isn't happening, right? That comes from, growing up in an alcoholic family, right? It's like you're told that something's actually not happening, but it is. And there's nothing more maddening than somebody saying that's not, oh, no, 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 that's not, no, that they're perfectly fine. They're great. And you're like, no, 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 that's not, I mean, knowing that you have a truth of what's actually going on versus what is the story that other people are starting to create or whatever, that can be really taxing, I think, on your mental health. I can only imagine. And that chipping away for years and being in several relationships of that, being able to unspin that is a really big deal, that you were able to do that.
Yeah. And I think it was just more that I didn't want to keep being in these relationships. Yeah. Initially I told myself I deserved to have more, but I didn't believe it. But it was a stepping stone too. It was learning to break away. And then, getting to the next relationship. I will say that each narcissist was a little bit lower on the spectrum. And then last year I dated two guys that weren't narcissists, but had their own issues. But it was kind of like, okay, we're going to step up and improve. The mental health goes down, it was a little bit better each time.
I love that though, Darla, because clearly you are someone who wants love in your life. And that's all really, really good and positive. And so once again, you're open to letting that process play itself out. And that's huge. That's a really big deal, I think. I mean, a lot of women out there would not say the same, especially after going through what you've gone through. When we think about what's coming up next for you, I know you've got clients and you've got your podcast. What has been kind of the next step for you? What is it that you're looking to create or do in the next year or two, just to kind of bring this into its full blossom?
Yeah. I would love to start doing in-person speaking engagements and start traveling around. As a singer, I kind of love the stage anyway. And I think that transfers over.
I didn't know you were a singer.
Yes.
That's amazing. So what would you do? Would you do speaking, or are you saying you might want to do performance?
Well, locally, I would love to find a band. I've been kind of pursuing that off and on for a while. But as far as for my business, I would love to just go and do workshops or motivational speeches, whatever form that takes. But I did have a vision when I was like 15 of being on this big stage, and I misinterpreted it at the time, but I wonder now if I actually saw something, because to me, that would be amazing to be in a stadium and to see all these women and to see that aha moment that I see when it clicks.
Yes.
To have thousands of them have that moment of, oh my gosh, she sees me and it is attainable, right? I can do that. She did it.
Darla, I love that. Well, first of all, I think that you got to listen to that. Right?
Yeah.
That's a huge, you just planted a big seed out there in the universe. You just did it.
I did. Yes, I did.
Now you've got to do it. No, but that's
right.
Amazing. And even, regardless of how you interpret that, the fact that you want to touch other people and that you want to be able to give people your inspiration and motivation to change things because they can see that you've done that. That's a big gift. I mean, that really is it's a wonderful thing to bring to other people. And it also helps you to heal as you're moving forward, right? It's like the more that you're helping others, like you said, you see that recognition in someone's face. You know yourself 20 years ago, you would have loved to have had someone just like you to be able to help lead the way. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Darla, I'm so excited for you. I cannot wait to hear what comes next for you. We will have to stay in touch because I think you're doing incredible work and you're on a path. It's a good one. It's a really, really good one. Well, thank you for your time, Darla. I appreciate you, and we'll be in touch on more.
We will be in
more
touch.
to come. More to come.
Yes.
And there will be all of Darla's links are going to be in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get a hold of her or see more about what she has to offer, they will be in the show notes for you to take a look at. Thanks again, Darla.
Thank you.
That's it for now. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Journeys Through Change podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or really wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us and leave a review if you enjoyed this episode so more women like you can find us and join in on the fun.